So next we're going to come up here to our long division using our variables. We have polynomial long division. We're dividing by x squared minus x minus 2. So that's going to be x squared. Notice that we're dividing by the second set of parentheses. So that goes on the outside of our division bracket. And x cubed plus 3x squared. Notice there's no x. You've got to be observant. I didn't recognize that. It's not an option. 3, 2, 1, and none. A cubic's got to have 4 terms. Quadratic's going to have 3 terms. If you're missing a term here, you have to put in a 0. If we're missing a term here, we put in a 0. So now, before, when we were up here, we were looking to see 8 goes into what in here? Well, we do the same thing. We take the largest term, which is x cubed. We take our largest term here, which is x squared, and we divide those. So we're focusing on our cubic being divided by a quadratic. And that's going to give us x to the first power. That's going to give us a linear. So as our exponent rules taught us, that's x to the first. So I'm going to suggest to put that x in the same column as your x's. No need to put them under x squareds or x cubes. Just put them underneath the x's. I guess it's above the x's, but put them in the column of the x's. Now, just like before, we take that and multiply through. So what do we get? X times x squared. X times x squared is x cubed. And it'll always match that exactly. Every time. That's what this guaranteed what we were getting. That'll match. And then x times a negative x is negative x squared. And x times negative 2 gives us negative 2x. And we draw a bar underneath it. So here we're going to come through and subtract this whole polynomial. Now you know that if you just put a negative sitting in front, that's not going to subtract the whole thing. You have to distribute it through. So we're going to change the sign, and I would suggest to use a separate color. Circle your new sign. Don't change negatives to positives. So here's our negative. We're going to change that sign. Change it to a positive. Change it to a positive. And then we just group up our terms now. Collect our like terms. Those are going to cross out. You have positive x cubed and negative x cubed. That will always cross out every single time. This becomes 4x squared. Not x to the fourth, but 3 plus 1 is 4 of those x squareds. This is a positive 2x. And we bring down our last term. So that's it. We do have a little bit more to go with this problem, but we're just going to repeat this pattern again and again. So what do you understand? What don't you understand? turn the video back, check out what you don't understand, where those numbers come from. We took our x cubed divided by x squared to get our x. We put that up here. We distributed through, showed our product, changed our signs, and collected like terms. Drop down our next. So here we have 4x squared divided by x squared, which is going to give us a 4. We have 4x squared, and our leading term that we're still dividing by a quadratic is going to be our x squared, which leaves us with just 4. The x squared and the x are going to reduce each other out, and you're still left with a 4. That doesn't become a 3. So we put the positive 4 up in the column with the constants. What are we going to do with that 4? We're going to multiply by our divisor. 4 times x squared. That has to match. 4 times negative x. 4 times negative 2. And draw our line. With your different color, change the signs because we're subtracting them. These will cross out, they always will. And we're left with 6x and a positive 1. Two x and 4x make 6x. Negative 7 and a positive 8 make 1. Notice there's nothing else to bring down. And even more importantly, this is 6 to the first power. This is the second power. Square doesn't go into x. So that helps remind us that we're done. So we have x plus 4 and 6x plus 1 over x squared minus x minus 2. So we're going to take x squared plus 2x minus 1 and divide that into 2x to the 4th plus x cubed plus 0x squareds plus x minus 1. It would be great if you would work through this problem. Don't just sit here and copy me. You give it a try. So now we're going to take our leading term, 2x to the 4th, divided by x squared. That gives us 2x squared. 2 divided by 1 is 2. X to the 4th, x squared, gives us x squared. So I'm going to put my 2x squared in the column with my x squareds. Multiply it through. 2 times 1 is 2. X squared and x squared is x to the 4th. That's always going to match. 2 times 2 is 4. X squared and x is x cubed. And 2 and negative 1, x squared. We change our sign. Using a different color allows it to pop. If you don't, no big deal. Not a deal breaker. These will always cross out. we got negative 3x cubed, a positive 2x squared, and we're going to bring down the positive x. Negative 3x squared divided by our largest term, x squared. That's going to give us negative 3. Right, I'm sorry, this should be 3x cubed. Should give us negative 3x. That's our largest term, needs to be here as negative 3x cubed divided by x squared. So we put down a negative 3x. Multiply, multiply, multiply. Negative 3 times negative 1 is negative 3x cubed. Those will always match. Negative and a positive is a negative. 3 times 2 is 6. X and x is x squared. Exponents will always match. Negative and a negative is a positive. 3 and 1. X and no x's. Come through and change the signs. So we have a negative 3 and a positive 3, so that's going to cross out completely. We're left with 8x squared and a negative 2x. And we drop down our minus 1. Then our last time through it, take your large term, 8x squared, divided by squared. That leaves you with the plus 8. Multiply it through. 8x squared, 8 times 1 is 8, and x squared. So those are going to match exactly. Plus 16x minus 8. Subtract, subtract, add it, because you're changing the signs. Those cross out completely like they always do. This becomes negative 18x. This becomes positive 7. So our final answer is the 2x squared minus 3x plus 8. And you got to put a plus. Then you put your negative 18x plus 7 with your divisor. You cannot make this a minus and make that an 18. Because then when you distribute it back through, you have to distribute it to both terms, so you'd have to make the 7 a negative, and it's all confusing. So put a plus every single time, and if your remainder is negative, then your numerator is negative.